Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. Welcome to AFSA's program, Retirement Ready, Planning for Employees at or Near Retirement Eligibility. My name is Dolores Brown. I'm AFSA's counselor for retirees. I'm a 2018 veteran of retirement myself, and my last overseas job was as management counselor in Cairo. Before we start the program, I wanted to run through a few of AFSA's retirement resources. We have resources that go along the retirement continuum from when you start thinking about retirement all the way into retirement. But for your purposes, I think that I'd just like to point out a few things. One is we have a page on AFSA.org called Retirement Resources that has over 100 source documents, authoritative documents, sort of like a one-stop shop on retirement issues. And it's not just for retirees, it's for people who are thinking about retirement. We have all DACs from state. We have information about the FEHB. We have information about post-retirement jobs. We have these wonderful checklists that actually our speaker, John Naland, makes up that actually run through the 10 to 12 crucial things that you should be thinking at different times of your career regarding retirement. So it's really a good thing for you to eyeball and at least be familiar with when you're thinking about retirement. It might be helpful for you. There's also on that page videos. So there's videos, for instance, of financial experts talking about who know our retirement system and can guide you through some of the things you should be thinking about. So I just really tell you it's a tip and take advantage of it. It's particularly important, I think, for foreign service employees from agencies other than state to know about this resource because they don't necessarily have access to our state intranet. They may not have access to a lot of retirement resources for the Foreign Service pension plans. So for other agency people, just be aware of this AFSA resource for you. The other resource we have is something called the Retirement Newsletter that John and I put together. It comes out every 2 months. That's not exactly a misnomer. Again, it has information that is germane to people who are thinking about retirement, not only retirees. There's a lot to know and consider in all of this. This month, we talked about REA opportunities, info on long-term care, how Medicare, I know that's long ways away for most of you, but how those premiums are going up, a lot of different issues that are germane to retirement. As I said, retirement is kind of complicated. It wasn't until I was kind of in the process that I realized, for instance, that, we have four legs on a chair as part of our retirement. We have our annuity, we have the thrift savings plan, the TSP, we have Social Security, and we have the FEHB, which remains underwritten by the government as we retire. So we have a very solid footing, but we still need to know how to put it together. So one of the things I wanted to say is much of this info that I'm talking about is for AFSA members only. I presume that all of you in the audience are AFSA members, but if you're not, we would really appreciate your joining us. We need the support of our constituents. We are pretty much fully funded by dues. Maybe many of you don't know that. So if you are interested in becoming a member, you can simply write to member@afsa.org, member@afsa.org. Okay, so now I'll go on to the modalities of this webinar. We're recording this and we'll post it on afsa.org in about a week in case you have to leave or you want to rewatch it or something. You are therefore muted and not visible, but you are welcome to post your questions in the Q&A. Post them as you think of them, and we will get to as many questions as we can within the time allotted. We obviously will focus on questions of general interest and not specific situations. The presentation itself will be about 40 minutes long, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for the Q&A session. And we are also posting links to all these resources that I am discussing in the chat. So with that, I'm very proud to introduce John Naland, AFSA's retiree vice president. John has already served 2 terms as AFSA president. He's in his 4th term as the retiree vice president. He was head of the retirement office when he was active duty, so he knows of what he speaks. He is the president of the Foreign Service Youth Foundation. He has been instrumental in developing and the various memorial plaques that we all see when we enter Maine State. So he's done so much for all of us and for the Foreign Service. With no further ado, here's John Naland.
Hello, everyone. Greetings wherever you are in the world. I commend you for being here because you're taking charge of your retirement planning. And when it comes to federal benefits, what you don't know can hurt you. So it's good for you to be here. As Dolores mentioned, we're going to, show you a bunch of resources so you can, continue your education and do your own due diligence. I'm going to be giving unofficial guidance. So, when you do come ready to retire, go to official guidance, especially if you have fewer than 20 years of service and you're retiring in one of the kind of special categories that allows you to do it with fewer than 20 years of service. You really need to understand those things. So I'm going to talk about 30 or so minutes. The FSI 4-day course gives 30 hours of instruction. So for example, in a chat, I saw a question about selling your primary residence that you haven't lived in 10 years. Well, that's covered in about an hour session at FSI. So I really encourage you to take the FSI training. Next month, there's the 2-day course, and it's being given virtually. And then in February, it's the 4-day course being given virtually. So please sign up for it and, get official guidance from, the Office of Retirement gives a presentation and so on and so forth. Excuse me. And as Dolores said, AFSA's here for you, both active duty and in retirement. So please continue your AFSA membership. So let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint going. So here we go. This is about retirement, but some of us don't make it to retirement for either personal reasons or whatever. Some folks decide to resign from the Foreign Service before they qualify for immediate annuity. So I just want to run through that. And these are the things you lose. Obviously, what you gain is, you can go on and do other things in your life. But this is what you lose financially if you resign before you qualify for a pension. You lose your entitlement to a monthly pension for life. And there are a couple examples, exceptions, that I'll go through. And if you do resign, you can get your pension contributions refunded. You lose your federal health insurance, which is a great benefit of retirement, and your FEGLI life insurance if you have it. Obviously, you get to keep your TSP account containing what you put in, and then if you've been in at least 3 years, you get the money that your agency contributed. And you also, of course, keep your Social Security credit earned while in the Foreign Service for you to add to previous and subsequent, civilian employment. So that's what you lose if you resign before you qualify for immediate retirement. Now, I stayed into the Foreign Service until I ticked out, and a lot of us do. But if you decide to retire, and this is retire with an immediate annuity, before you're, quote, kicked out, end quote, because you want to do other things with your life, or you have family caregiver responsibilities or something. So basically, this is what happens if you retire, before you have to. Obviously, you lose a full year's lose a year's salary. You lose a year of service credit, and that's both, another year added to your pension calculation, plus your high 3 calculation will likely go up if you get a promotion or a cost of living increase in your final year of employment. You lose, and this is important, another year of continuing to contribute to your TSP and having the government contribute 5% of your salary to your TSP. And we retirees, I'm a retiree, we don't get to use the flexible spending accounts, and we don't pay our FEHB premiums with pre-tax dollars. So I'm not trying to convince you to stay into the Foreign Service until the day you have to go, but this is what does happen if you retire before you have to. So when can you retire? In the Foreign Service, the typical category is a voluntary retirement when you're at least age 50 with at least 20 years of service. So that's the most typical one. Now, we also have something called a retirement. If you have between 10 and 19 years of service and you want to retire and you're at least what they call your minimum retirement age, you can do that. Now, for anyone born in 1970 or later, your MRA is age 57. So that's kind of the ballpark. So that's another category of voluntary retirement, your MRA. And then if you kind of join the Foreign Service as a third career or something, and you reach age 62 and you have at least 5 years in the Foreign Service, then you can do a voluntary retirement. Obviously, it won't be a high pension if you just have 5 years of service, but it'll be a pension. Involuntary retirement, this is those of us like me who tick out. If you're FS1 or above, that can be at any age. So if you join the Foreign Service, right out of college or something, and you tick out at age, 49, you can start an immediate pension, even though you're not 50. And this is for FS1s and above. If you're FS2 or below, you tick out when you reach age 50. And if you tick out before then the government keeps you on working until you're age 50. And this is a policy that's been in the Foreign Affairs Manual for 50 years, although it's not in federal law. So, AFSA and the State Department obviously have maintained it for 50 years. So I certainly hope they do, because a lot of people now do tick out at FS2 or below. And then if you join the Foreign Service really early, really young, you can retire at any age, even in your 40s, if you have 25 years of service, if you're involuntarily retired, if you tick or tis out. Mandatory retirement, even those of you who keep getting promoted and everything, we still have to retire at age 65, unless you're a sitting ambassador or a few other exceptions. Now, there's some other categories of when you can retire. One is a deferred retirement. And that is if you resign with at least 10 years of service, you can start a pension later at your minimum retirement age, or at age 62 with at least 5 years of service. And then, of course, in the Foreign Service, like civil service, there's disability retirement, although the medical, requirements, are pretty high. So basically, if you have 20 years of service, or you tick out or have mandatory retirement at age 65, those are pretty common. If you do any of these other categories, the MRA, deferred retirement, then you really need to understand the rules and get information from the Office of Retirement to make sure you're doing it right. How much do you get? If you're at least age 50 with at least 20 years of service, the Foreign Service calculation is 1.7% of your high 3 salary times first 20 years of service plus 1% of the high 3 for any years beyond 20. And the high 3 salary for those of us in the Foreign Service is almost always our final 3 years of employment when our salary is the highest. And if you have some unusual circumstance, we had a higher salary early in your career, then the Office of Retirement will use that. So anyway, here's the example of the calculation. And you can see someone who ends up with a $150,000 salary will get a pension of, quote, only, end quote, $66,000. So that's a big step down. So that shows you that your TSP and Social Security are vital parts of your retirement, because under our current retirement system, we take a big step down. And that 66,000 in this example is before they take out survivor benefits, health and life insurance premiums, and federal and state tax withholding. So anyway, so another plug for funding your TSP, so you can rely on it. Now, what is the high three salary? It's based upon your base pay and either your domestic locality pay, if you served in the US in your final 3 years of employment, or your virtual locality pay if you were overseas. And no, it does not include hardship pay, danger pay, things like that. So, and again, in the FSI training, the Office of Retirement's hour and 45-minute presentation will drill down in all of this in much greater detail and from authoritative sources. The calculation is the same if you tick out, and it's the same if you retire at age 65 with at least 5 years of service. So that's kind of the basic calculation. And as I said, once you get into the minimum retirement age, deferred retirement, disability retirement, the rules are unique for each of those categories. And in most cases, if you have fewer than 20 years of service, the calculation of your pension is much lower. Now, that does not apply to people who retire at age 65 on the last day of the month in which they turn 65. So that's an exception. And if you retire under MRA before age 62, there are additional reductions. So if you're trying to hit the door as soon as possible, just make sure you understand, what your pension is going to be, because it might be lower than you originally anticipated. So what do you get? A monthly pension payment for life, which is a big deal. And then if you, as they say, predecease your spouse, if you have a spouse, then they get half of your pension for the rest of their lives. And that's another big deal. Annuity supplement. Now, a lot of us don't know what the annuity supplement is. So basically, in our current retirement system, we pay into Social Security. But Social Security won't let us start taking money until age 62. And so the Foreign Service Pension System and also the Civil Service Pension System gives a supplement to those who retire before age 62 as a bridge payment, because Social Security can't pay you. Your pension program pays you a similar amount. So that's what the annuity supplement is. And that goes away at age 62, whether or not you take Social Security at 62. You get a lump sum payment for unused annual leave at retirement. And that's, if that can be, $10,000 or more, depending on how much annual leave you have and your salary. So, save up your annual leave, because it's a nice, retirement going away gift. Social Security, we get a monthly payment for life starting at or after age 62. TSP, we keep our TSP. You can decide when and how much to withdraw. You can move it to an IRA, all kinds of options. And again, in the FSI training, there's, over an hour on the TSP. FEHB, we carry that into retirement, and the government pays about 2/3 under current law. And I'll get to that in a minute. But that's a great benefit, having gold standard health insurance that you only pay about 1/3 of the actual cost of. FEGLI life insurance, if you have FEGLI, there are other options. If you want to carry it into retirement, you may. And one option, and they'll go into this in great detail in FSI training, is, and this is the one I took, is that you stop paying FEGLI life insurance premiums when you get to age 65, but the coverage drops by 75%. And the theory here is, if by 65, you don't have a mortgage to pay, you don't have kids in college, things like that, then you don't need as much life insurance. And so the coverage will drop by 75%, leaving enough money for a funeral and things like that, but you don't pay anymore. So that's an option that they will explain in great detail in FSI training. Obviously, your TSP, as I've already mentioned, is an important part of your retirement. I'm not a financial advisor, but if you have all your money in the G fund, 30 years from now, you're going to regret it. So, and that's as far as I'll go in terms of giving financial advice. So, you need to realize that inflation is out there. It kicked up again the last couple of years. Who knows what's going to happen? So, you need to have a portfolio that's going to keep up with inflation. And from time to time, you should review your portfolio as world conditions change. Issues to consider. We have an up or out system, and your career can end sooner than you want. If there's a slowdown in promotions or whatever, your upward trajectory could stall and you could tick out. And obviously, with the change of administration and change in college, it's possible if there's a budget cut, there could be reductions in force. And obviously, if that looks like it might happen in the next year, AFSA will put out all kinds of information about that. It's possible that future retirement benefits could cut. The president and Congress, can sign a bill cutting most of our retirement benefits. Or taxes could go up, or as we're hearing now, taxes could go down. So all kinds of things could change with your benefits. So just keep that in mind. Social Security, you need to decide when it'll start. And of course, the question for years is, will it be there in 20 or 30 or 40 years? And Congress keeps kicking the can down the road in terms of making it more solvent. So we'll have to see. It could be that 10 or 20 years from now, the Social Security benefits you're getting are reduced, by 20% or something, because the so-called trust fund, runs out. Medicare B, once you turn age 65, it's a big decision to decide whether to sign up for Medicare Part B. My wife and I did, and we're glad we did. But if you have a high income in retirement, you're going to go to another job or whatever, you might have to pay more for Medicare Part B than for example, for people like I do. So it's something you need to figure out when you reach age 65 and you're retired. Post-retirement employment, keep in mind that there can be an impact on your pension. If you go back to work full-time, say in the civil service, then your foreign service pension will have to be frozen, because we in the foreign service, unlike the military and the intelligence community, we can't, quote, double dip. And if you have significant wage income before age 62, your annuity supplement can be reduced. And the same for your Social Security payment early in retirement. And then everything I'm talking about is about health here. It's about money, but money is not everything. So health is important. So keep that in mind. When you do retire, if you have more time to care for yourself and eat right and sleep and stuff like that, keep your health up. So here's some retirement planning checklist things you need to keep in mind. And as Dolores mentioned, there are a number on the AFSA website, and the same information's there in a little more detail. Always keep your beneficiary designations up to date. If your TSP form or your FEGLI form says that spouse 1 gets it and now you're on to spouse 2, then spouse 2 is not going to get it. So if you have a major change, in your family structure, make sure your beneficiary designations are up to date. Prior service. If I was in the Army and I bought back my military time, folks in the Peace Corps can buy back the Peace Corps time. And what this does is it adds to your foreign service pension. It gives you more years. But you have to do that in advance. Because, for example, with military buyback, it has to go to the military finance office and to get your records and all kinds of stuff. So do this well before retirement. And it's the same if you were in the civil service before the foreign service. yes, you get retirement credit for that, but that retirement credit right now is in the civil service, which you're not in. So you need to get the Office of Personnel Management to send your contributions over to state finance. And that can take up to a year because OPM is not always known for its super efficiency. So things like that, you need to get going on well before retirement. And make sure you focus on the fact that the service computation date you've probably seen forever on your forms, that's your leave service computation date. And for that, they give you all kinds of credit for any other federal service. But if you haven't bought back that other service or transferred the civil service funds to the Foreign Service Fund, then you don't have that yet for your retirement service computation date. So again, if any of this applies to you, just get going and take care of that. And if you've been divorced in any time in your federal service, either Foreign Service, Civil Service, during your military time, anything, the Office of Retirement at state has to review the divorce documentation because there's specific law in the Foreign Service Act giving ex-spouses, part of the pension unless the divorce documentation says otherwise. So Office of Retirement needs to review that to figure out who gets what. Retirement planning, additional things, TSP, any IRAs, make sure you maximize your contributions as much as you can. And then, there's now Roth and traditional. You can have all of one or some of both, but you need to understand the differences. And again, especially in the 2-day early to mid-career retirement planning course at FSI, they go into the Roth versus traditional more. Estate planning, make sure you have those documents. And then if you move to a new state or if another 10 or 15 years have passed since you had them filled out, have a new attorney look at them and make sure they're up to date. Leave at retirement, save your sick leave because it gets added to your pension time. So, I had 32 years in the Army and the Foreign Service, plus I had a year of unused sick leave. So that year got added onto my Foreign Service pension. Save your annual leave because you cash it in retirement, and then home leave goes away at retirement. So if you still have a couple years to go and your next post wants you to rush to post, tell them, no, I got to use my home leave because it goes away at retirement. Long-term care insurance, the federal program is still frozen for another up to 2 years. But if you take the FSI training, they go into some detail on some other options. So you don't have to have long-term care insurance, but you should review it and understand what happens if you don't. And then Employee Express, if you're State Department, you know what this is. If you're AID, Commerce or Agriculture, you may not know what it is because you use some other retirement financial software. But at retirement, everyone in the Foreign Service, all retirees, start using Employee Express. And it's where you go in, to see what your pension payment is, to update your W-2, to change your address and your bank account, all kinds of stuff. So you can email Charleston and have your request be one of 1,000 they're working on, or you can just go online at midnight and update your documents. So use Employee Express. Steps to take during your final year of employment, and there's a checklist on the AFSA website about this. You can contribute the annual maximum to your TSP even if you retire at mid-year. And of course, what you do is you increase the contributions at the beginning of the year. Now you have to figure this out. You have to figure out how many pay periods there are and how much you can contribute, and but you can do that. So even if a lot of us retire on September 30th, but you can make 12 years of contribution, 12 months of contributions by September 30th, if you want to. Flexible spending account maximizes use because retirees don't have that. Employee Express, before you do retire, if you're state, this won't apply to AID, Commerce and Ag, But if you are state, go into login.gov and add your personal email address, because when you do retire, your state.gov account will go away, email address. And if you're other agency besides state, as soon as you retire, or within 45 days, you'll get a log-on information for Employee Express. Retirement application submitted at least 90 days prior to retirement. Now you can submit it the day before and you'll still retire, but your first pension payment is going to be not, 30 days later, because the Office of Retirement needs that time. And if you're at other agencies besides state, get going early on submitting your paperwork, because your agency has to do some processing and they need to pull up your pay records and things like that and ship them over to state. AFSA, if you've been paying your AFSA dues out of your salary for decades, like I did, that ends when your salary goes away. So you basically need to rejoin AFSA in retirement. And there's information on the AFSA website. Retirement planning seminars, I mentioned this a bunch of times. Just go on the State Department website and drill down to the Career Transition Center at FSI, and they list the courses. And depending on, you can probably sign up through your career development officer, or if you're another agency, there will be information on how to sign up. And I really suggest taking these courses. And if you took them 5 or so years ago, or even a couple years ago, you can retake them. Official guidance from the Office of Retirement. There's this site called the RNet site. It just now transitioned a couple months ago to a new web address, and they haven't, unfortunately, uploaded all the previous information, but we're told they're working on it. But as a retiree, you can get information there. If you're state and you're still active duty, then on the Department of State's intranet, you have your employee retirement portal, and then the Bureau of Global Talent Management, has a website with information on retirement. Office of Retirement puts out ALDACs every so often, and AFSA posts them on our website. And I mentioned the RET presentations, Office of Retirement presentations at FSI. That's official information. And then they take Q&A at the end, and they stay there until they answer all the questions. So that's a good thing to do. And then if you have any questions on retirement, you can, if you're state, you email hrsc@state.gov. That's down in Charleston. And then if you're not state, while you're still active duty, state wants you to ask your own HR professionals first. But then everyone within their last 6 months of service before retirement, including other foreign service agencies, they can meet with their Office of Retirement counselor and ask specific questions. And if you have a spouse, you can include your spouse in the meeting if you want. Again, Dolores Brown mentioned lots of information on the AFSA website. Here's some of them. And, I encourage you to check it out and just see what's there. And again, on our website, we have ALDACs, we have videos like Dolores mentioned, and there's a list of financial planners, tax advisors, and estate planners. And of course, AFSA doesn't recommend, just like we don't recommend attorneys to help you with a grievance or something, but we do list ones that have worked with foreign service members and retirees and know the foreign service retirement and, and have been, found useful. So, save your retirement paperwork. I'm not a paperwork hoarder, but, save your retirement paperwork. And then an important thing to know is that for us in the Foreign Service, the Office of Personnel Management doesn't do anything for us because we're Foreign Service. State Department takes care of us. But OPM does run the FEGLI program. So soon after retirement, OPM will send you information about your FEGLI life insurance. And on it will be your civil service insurance number. And that's something you should hold on to. Read the Office of Retirement's annual newsletter. It's supposed to be posted this week at that website. So if they manage that, you can take a look just to see what it looks like. Again, use Employee Express after retirement to manage your pension. And then if you have any questions about your benefits or changing them, you go through hrsc@state.gov, not OPM. And then if you have a question about your foreign service pension, you go to State Finance, and there's that email address. Monitor your TSP account over time and change the portfolio. If the stock market gets too scary and you want to make your portfolio a little more conservative, go ahead. If you realize that you're going to need that, you'll be still drawing for that money 30 years from now, you might want to be a little more aggressive, because over 30 years, we would hope the stock market will end up higher. And then, as I mentioned, please maintain your AFSA membership in retirement, because again, it funds AFSA's efforts and helps us defend your earned retirement benefits from potential changes by Congress. So that is it. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Okay, the first question actually, I'll take. The question is, I would like to know about TSP Roth. Is the max contribution between both TSP and TSP Roth, or are they separate maximums? Now, I can't say that I can answer this question, maybe John could, but I do know that on our retirement resources page, there is a video specifically about TSP, Roth, and so on. And it's by William Carrington, who is the spouse of a Foreign Service officer, and gives extremely detailed and good advice about all of these issues. He's a professional financial consultant. So I would refer you to that video on afsa.org. So on to other questions. Okay, we've covered this a little, somewhat, John, but it's about timing. It's the whole issue of establishing an Employee Express account. When is it best to do that, particularly for, this is a non-state foreign service person who is asking this question. When should they do that?
Okay, for this, I'll start with the state people. You already have an Employee Express account, and then it converts to Annuitant Express at retirement. But you should go into login.gov before and put in your personal email address. And then you can start accessing it, without using the gold chip on your State Department ID. Because in retirement, you're going to have to log in using your login.gov password. Now, for the other agencies, after retirement, I think within 45 days, you'll get a letter from OPM with information on Employee Express / Annuitant Express and how to log in. And we've asked several AID members who were going to retire to let us know how it actually happened. And we never got an actual reply, but it does happen somehow. You get a letter and it does work. We AFSA have never gotten the absolute details, and State Finance doesn't seem to know either. So, but it does work.
Okay. This is about FSI courses, which you're very right to emphasize, because they can go into the kind of detail that people need to really make informed decisions. This question revolves around cost, and it's as follows. I've heard that FSI courses are not free for non-state employees. How about the retirement course? How does that all work?
So, I was state, and I know it's free for State Department employees. And I do believe that employees of other federal agencies have to pay a tuition. So I don't know if it's listed on the State Department's website, but anyway, you'll have to maybe ask your HR professional, because those courses always have AID, Commerce and Agriculture members in it. So maybe they can tell you what the tuition is, and of course the agency pays it. So you might want to do that before any potential budget cuts next year. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, that shouldn't be an impediment, but you may need to talk to someone and plan ahead. It should not be an impediment that your agency has to pay, at least at this stage. I've not heard about it. I just heard there can be some bureaucratic hassles associated with it, but you should be able to take courses, and I think that it's really important to do so. Okay, when do you propose, John, that people buy back their prior service? How far in advance should they start that process?
So if you decide to stay in the Foreign Service to retirement, whenever that is, I'd go ahead and buy it back as soon as you can because you start having to pay some interest after a while. And I saw a question in chat. How do you know, someone said they bought it back, but how they know that it went through? Well, go in your EOPF and see if there's a paid in full memo. And if there's no paid in full memo, then if you're state, email hrsc@state.gov, and ask them to investigate, because, if you went through all the effort to buy back Peace Corps military time, it needs to show up, to be added into your retirement service computation date. But, for everyone else, like if you're in civil service and you want OPM, to send that money to state, I'd get going on that as soon as you, determine you're going to stay in the Foreign Service until retirement.
Right. And it's good to start. Well, I've heard of people who it can take a year. It could take up to a year, even more, to buy back this credit. So don't sit on your hands. It's best to try to do that so that you're not biting your fingernails about the whole thing. Is the service computation date on my PAR after buying back, this has to do with buying back, not the same as my retirement service computation date? I don't know the answer to that question.
So I believe in for state in the employee benefits system, I believe it'll list your retirement service computation date. I don't have access to it anymore because I'm retired. But if there's any question, about whether or not they included any time you bought back or civil service time you transferred, go ahead and email hrsc@state.gov if you're state, and just get them to clarify, what do they have listed as your retirement service computation date? Because that's what they're going to use to determine your pension.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about questions having to do with pension and the pension calculation. The first question is, does the Foreign Service pension calculation differ between foreign service agencies? I thought USAID, for instance, had a 2% per year figure.
No, the Foreign Service calculation is 1.7% for the first 20 years. Now, the intelligence community has a different calculation, but no, we in the Foreign Service have 1.7 for the first 20 years.
Okay. How much is the annuity supplement and how is it calculated?
So in the FSI training, they have a really complicated slide that drills down into this, but it's basically what Social Security would pay you before age 62 if they could pay you. So if you go into your My Social Security account and see, what your Social Security benefit, would be at a certain age, that's kind of the ballpark figure. But, if you want the real answer, go to the FSI training and they'll have a numerator, denominator, and, and you can figure it out.
Right. And if you are working, you have to report that income and that will reduce your annuity supplement.
It can reduce it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's important to know. And you do have to report every year, even if you are not earning, if you're on the annuity supplement, in order to have it to continue, but you'll worry about that later. Okay, here's another question about the pension. I understand the pension payments are not part of the federal budget. So I am curious if the Foreign Service Pension Fund is solvent. There is no info online on this.
If you look really hard on the State Farm website in a couple 100-page financial report, you can find it. But I think there's 21 billion with a B dollars in the Foreign Service Pension Fund. And for better or worse, it's in government treasury bills, not the stock market. If it were in the stock market, it'd be $100 billion, but that's a political comment here. Anyway, but the Foreign Service Pension Fund has $21 billion in it. And there's a mechanism in federal law that if there's any shortfall, that the Treasury makes up the difference. So, I think we're in really good shape. Um,
All right. Okay, thank you for that. This is a little on a different topic, but could you explain, John, about the rules for employment following retirement, and what does double dipping mean, and what can you do and what can't you do in terms of, and keep your annuity?
Yeah, so if you retire and you're getting a foreign service pension annuity, then if you go back full time with the federal government, like in a civil service job, at the Pentagon or something, then your foreign service pension has to be suspended because in the foreign service, we're not allowed to have our full pension plus our full new federal salary. AFSA's been trying to get that changed, but we have not been successful yet. Anyway, so now if you want to go back part-time, that's where the whole reemployed annuitant program comes in. And so that's where you can keep your full pension, but you're limited on how many hours and how much money you can earn and reemployed. And I saw a question in chat from our friend Matt Weiler, pointing out that the reemployed annuitant program is something if you want to do it, you have to network. It's not you say here I am and they sign you up. And so again, in the FSI, in the end of career job search transition program, they do have information on the reemployed annuitant program. And I think he mentioned in his post that the Africa Bureau is a great hirer of reemployed annuitants. And of course, the Freedom of Information Act and some other offices hire a bunch of folks. So keep that in mind. Then any income, if you go to work for Boeing or something and you get a big salary, that can reduce or end your annuity supplement. And that's the thing you get before age 62. So, I mean, that's a nice problem to have. You have a high salary that, you lose some of your supplement, but, that means you have a high salary somewhere else. Anyway.
Okay, this has to do with some, the kind of money you get when you retire. So it's related to that. John, you mentioned that at retirement, you get a lump sum annual leave payment. Don't you also get a lump sum sick leave payment?
No, the sick leave time gets added to your federal pension. So for example, if you have 25 years in the foreign service and a year of sick leave, then your pension is based upon 26 years of service. And of course, Congress does that so people, don't abuse their sick leave. They save it and then they get, reimbursed. They get some money at retirement. So your sick leave gets added to your pension calculation.
It gets added to your pension calculation, but does it count towards the 20 years that you need to be in to retire?
No, it does not. That's another reason to take the FSI training where they really drill down. So, if you need 20 years to retire, you need 20 years of federal service to retire. And then if you have another year of sick leave, then you get, 21 years of pension calculation, but you can't use the sick leave to get you over the goal line.
Yes, okay. That was one of the questions. Can you use home leave immediately preceding your retirement date?
No, because home leave is not for you to take a vacation. It's for you to get reacquainted with the United States before you go overseas again to represent our country. So it's only prior between transfers well before retirement.
Okay, so here's a few questions about benefits in Congress. Can Congress reduce retirement benefits for those of us already in service or only for those joining post any changes?
10 years ago, I would have probably given you a different answer, but we just don't know. I pay pretty close attention to, some of the proposals. And although for decades there have been proposals to cut federal employee retirement benefits, currently they're not, bubbling up to the top anywhere. They're going for things like reducing employment. So, but yeah, Congress could, even under President Obama, they raised the amount of money that we have to pay while we're active duty into our pension fund. So, Congress could reduce or end the subsidy for the health benefits. They could do away with the annuity supplement. There's all kinds of things that, they could do, and it'd take, both houses and the president to sign it. And of course, AFSA joining up with the civil service unions and NARF and others, would oppose any cuts to our earned benefits.
Okay. Now, here's some questions about timing of retirement, and I think I see some maybe need for clarification, and some of these I'm going to ask them as they're written. Is the requirement to retire at age 50, if you are an FS2 or below, a policy across the Foreign Service, including USAID, or only applicable to the State Department?
Yeah, so that's the rule, that if you tick out before 62. Now, that in the FAM, the Foreign Affairs Manual, that only applies to state. And frankly, I've never heard an example from other agencies, so I just don't know. And I don't know if the Office of Retirement people would know either. So, if you're AID or whatever, you might check your own, FAM version and see what's in there, or ask your HR people.
Yes. Yes. Okay, the next one. What if you're at 20 years but younger than 50 when you, quote, retire? Do all these rules benefits just kick in when I turn 50?
So no, it's much more complicated than that.
Yes.
The question is, if you tick out before age 50, then that's a different thing. So you need to, there are a couple slides where I gave the various ways to qualify for retirement. You need to qualify under one of those in order to retire on an immediate annuity. And again, FSI training drills down in this in much more detail.
Yes, the actual PowerPoint that we just presented will be posted on our retirement resources page if you missed the beginning of the program where some of this information was presented. Okay, again, I'm just going to repeat this question. I'm eligible for retirement now. This is the first time I've heard that if I retire before age 65 or tis date, then I give up a year's salary. Can you explain?
Well, what I was saying is, if you're eligible to retire now and you're not being forced to retire, then if you retire now, fine. But, if you had stayed on, you'd get another year's salary and you'd put more in the TSP and things like that. So I'm not trying to convince people to stay, to the bitter end, but I just want to, let you know that if you do voluntarily leave before, are up or out or age 65, then, you're giving up some federal benefits. Now you go on to do something else in the private sector or just, travel, then that's good, but there is, you do lose some financial benefits.
Right. That's just to be taken into the calculation.
Right.
Has there been any cases against, say, state on the age mandate to retire at 65? It could perhaps be interpreted as age discrimination.
You can Google Vance versus Bradley, U.S. Supreme Court, 1979. And the Supreme Court, on an 8-1 vote with Thurgood Marshall dissenting, said that the Congress, had good reason to set a mandatory retirement age for the Foreign Service due to the wear and tear, the upper out system wanting to get new talent, in there. So this went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now it was 1979, but 8-1 vote reaffirmed it, and so that settled it for now.
Okay, here is one about EFMs. My spouse is not foreign service, but has worked many years in EFM positions. I heard that EFMs may also earn a pension with enough credible years of service, but the process isn't clear. Where can I find information about the EFM retirement process?
So it's just the civil service retirement system. If your spouse is employed overseas, they've been paying into the FERS, the civil service system, and if they accumulate 5 years of payments into that system, here, there, and everywhere, it adds up to 5 years or more. Then at age 62, I believe, although it's a civil service rule, so they can qualify for a pension. So I would email, if you're state, hrsc@state.gov, and if you're another agency, your HR folks, and just to verify how much service time, your spouse has accumulated, and so you can gauge how close he or she is to retirement eligibility.
Okay. Here's one concerning divorce. And by the way, we do have on the AFSA Retirement Resources page an ALDAC that goes through in great detail the implications of divorce on your annuity, so on. So if you have any interest in that or concern, you can see that ALDAC on our Retirement Resources page. But here's the question. I was divorced 8 years before I started with the federal government. I did remarry while with state and have stayed married. Will I have to present my divorce decree from my first marriage?
I don't believe so, but I would, because the theory is if you were divorced while in the federal government, either foreign service, civil service, military, Peace Corps, then that divorce decree could have discussed, your federal benefits. And I don't believe that if you're divorced before, it matters, but you can just send a quick email to hrsc@state.gov and just to confirm it. Because, a divorce decree before your federal government, they'd have to have ESP to know that you're going to work for the federal government. So I don't think Office of Retirement has to look at it, but just to clarify, so you don't, get within 90 days of retirement, all of a sudden someone wants to go through your divorce documentation.
Okay. A question on survivor benefits. You mentioned spouses get half the pension if the retiree passes away before the spouse. What about other benefits such as the health plan?
So, obviously you have to elect a survivor benefit first, and that reduces your own pension payment by 10%. But almost everyone does, unless they're a tandem couple or independently wealthy or something. So you will elect a survivor benefit. So your spouse will, get half of your pension if you predecease them. Now, if you have an ex-spouse, there's a couple spouses in there, it gets more complicated, but, and then your spouse, gets to continue your FEHB. And of course, they would get the FEGLI life insurance payout if you put them down as a beneficiary, and then they would inherit your TSP.
Okay. Is it possible to retire at 50 and get access to my TSP thrift savings plan?
So there are about 9 ways you can get your TSP without paying a penalty before age 50. So either take the FSI training or go on the TSP website, because there's a bunch of ways you could do it. But remember, if you start taking your TSP in your 40s or even at 50, is it going to be there 40 years later, or are you going to drain it? So anyway, just keep that in mind.
Okay. Now, this may be something you're not familiar with. I'm not. Do you know about the IRS rule of 55 and how that can apply to us? I'm not sure.
Well, on TSP, there's a whole bunch of TSP website. There's a number of ways you can avoid the early withdrawal penalty, and I just don't remember them all. So I'm not familiar exactly with that question.
All right. Okay, well, we've hit the hour of 8 a.m. So I think it's time for us to say goodbye. I want to thank John Naland, Christine Mealy, and Hannah Chapman, who are working behind the scenes to put this all together. I want to thank our audience for joining us and for being AFSA members, and I wish everyone a happy holiday. You take care now out there. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.